Hello and welcome to my presentation of the paper Written Communication Apprehension Experienced by First Year Undergraduate Accounting Students. My name is Chris Ireland. I'm currently with the School of Liberal Arts at Sukhothai Thammasatira Open University in Nonthaburi in Thailand. So first of all, I'll just give you an overview of the presentation. So we're going to begin by just looking at communication apprehension and then focusing in on written communication apprehension, which is the focus of today's paper. Then we'll look at why we've chosen accounting students for this particular study. We'll look at some previous research which has been conducted into written communication apprehension with accounting students. Then we'll focus on the current research that I'm presenting in this paper, look at the quantitative data and the qualitative data, and then some brief discussions that come out of that and draw some conclusions. Okay, so let's get started. So the first question in general would be, why communication apprehension? Well, I did my doctoral studies a few years back, and the students were from a university in the north of England. As part of the data collection, I collected data for spoken communication and written communication. And in the end, I focused in on oral communication apprehension. Actually, it was public speaking anxiety. So a subsection of oral communication apprehension. A lot of the data that I collected at the time I didn't use in my doctorate. And then during the pandemic I revisited some of the ideas that I'd had, and I could see that I had a lot of data on written communication apprehension. So while the main focus of much of the research for communication apprehension in the literature is on speaking, and particularly public speaking anxiety, written communication apprehension is an issue. You will see from the paper that there's still concern around the world about communication skills in general amongst accounting students, and that there is a perception that accounting is still number crunching, very mechanical, and that it's important to try and overcome this perception and try and demonstrate accounting to be a communicative discipline. The problem, if this doesn't happen, is that it will continue to attract people that believe that it's not communicative, and that when communication has to happen, be it spoken or written, these accountants are more likely to experience apprehension. And this is why communication apprehension is an issue in the area of accounting. So in terms of previous research, there hasn't been a great deal. While there's been plenty of research into spoken communication apprehension, there's been relatively little in the area of written communication apprehension. And what research there has been has mostly been quantitative in nature, either using Daly and Miller's original questionnaire or Hassel et al.'s adapted version of Daly and Miller's questionnaire. What is clear is that few studies have delved deeper and looked at the reasons that students give for their apprehension during writing tasks. Okay, so this brings us to the purpose of the current study. So the specific objectives of this study are, firstly, to compare the levels of writing apprehension reported by the students in the study with the levels reported in previous studies. Then to compare the levels of writing apprehension reported by the students following a year of study with the results reported at the outset of their studies. So we'll be comparing 2 iterations of the students' responses to the written communication apprehension, the adapted version. And then finally, an objective is to gain insight into what aspects of essay writing cause students to be apprehensive. That is the main focus of the paper. Okay, I just want to talk for a short while now about the design of the study. So it's underpinned by a critical realist philosophy. So what we mean by that is basically that we don't believe that we can necessarily find the truth, or that we may not even know if we have found the truth when we're conducting research. But if we design research that tries to shine a light on what we're trying to find out, then we think we can be confident that we are closer to what we're trying to find out. So what we're using in this case is Hassel's et al.'s adapted questionnaire, which has been used quite a few times before by researchers. But we're supporting that with reflective writing that the students conducted and gave me permission to use for research. The reflective writing is writing that they did about their experiences of essay writing at the start of their accounting course. So by using both of these, I'm hoping to get a closer idea of how they feel about writing and what it is that makes them apprehensive. So here we can see the results of the questionnaire. So WCA1 was administered at the start of the course, and WCA2 was administered following the conclusion of the course. And it shows that, firstly, addressing the first objective when comparing to previous studies, that the means are quite similar to those obtained in those previous studies. I haven't reproduced them in this presentation, but they are in the paper if you wish to make reference. Then addressing the second objective, the WCA1 was administered at the start of the course, and with the WCA2 administered 7 months later at the end of the course, we can see that the means have fallen in a few points. They were all between 65 and 66 on WCA1, and they've fallen to between 64 and 62 for the iteration WCA2. However, as with any mean, it's important to look at the standard deviation and the range. What this reveals is that, for example, with the 2014-15 cohort, there's quite a big spread. So clearly inside that, we can see with a low of the first iteration of 38, and a high of 103, there's quite a big spread of results there. Added to this, you'll notice that for each cohort, the highs are higher in the second iteration than in the first iteration. So despite the means for the whole cohort falling, for some individuals, their apprehension towards writing was higher by the end of the course than it was at the beginning of the course. So this is clearly something concerning. So this then leads us on to the final objective, which is to look at the reasons that might come out of reflective writing, so reasons for a student feeling apprehensive. So what I did here is I took the reflective writing and coded it for any time it appeared that the students were talking about anxiety, nerves, apprehension, about the essay writing tasks that they were completing. So there was 2 that they were completing in about their first month of studies. So you can see from this table that feelings of inadequate skills development were the highest category. That amounted to just over a quarter of the items. Next was confusion over the task. That was followed by poor organisation or issues of time management that students were experiencing. Next, most numerous was novelty, and then the 5th category was confusion over the content. So these 5 together made up over 70% of all of the times that nervousness or apprehension was expressed about the writing activity. Okay, so since it was the largest category, I decided to then subcode feeling of inadequate skills development to see if there were any areas that were more common than others. And writing ability was coded 38 times out of 86, and reading was coded 29 times out of 86. So together they made up more than 3/4 of all coding for feeling of inadequate skills development. So looking at the kinds of things that came up here, general concerns about writing skills were very common. So students just expressing worries about their writing being up to the level required at university. Then a number of students expressed concerns about referencing. Either this is the first time they were doing it or they were finding it particularly difficult. The prospect of having to find sources was making some students nervous. So they were worrying about how they were going to find sources. Others were worried about just reading, that they found it difficult and this was making them nervous. Another is they weren't sure that they were reading appropriately, so were they reading the right material? Others were just nervous because they just basically said that they lacked writing experience, and issues of concentration came up a few times as well. Then confusion relating to the task in general. Some students said that they were unsure what they were being asked to do, and so that made them apprehensive. Some other students said that they became confused once one of the tasks had started, and that had made them nervous. And then there seemed to be some nerves generated by the way that the task was presented to the students. That came up a few times. Now for novelty, there were really just 2 things that fitted into this. One, it seemed to be that all of this was part of their new situation. So they were having to do some essay writing in a new situation. So all of that together was making them apprehensive. And then the fact that it was a new kind of writing task for many made some apprehensive. And then the 4th and 5th categories I thought were best illustrated with quotes. So confusion over the content. One example here is, I was nervous because I did not know what I was supposed to write about. So that was one of examples of confusion over content. Another quote here, I was very nervous as what I thought I needed to write for the essay turned out to be the opposite. So those are two examples of the kinds of things that students said in the category confusion content. And then in the fifth category, poor organisation or time management, one student said, I think that the key reason that increased my stress levels throughout the task was that the planning and organisation aspect of my essay was deficient, which therefore led me to become really anxious. And then another quote in this category, I felt extremely nervous and anxious as I didn't plan my time in the most effective way. So there's one example which is more organisation and the other is more to do with time management. So, brief discussion and conclusion. So what this research has shown is that these students had similar levels of apprehension to the findings in previous studies with accounting students. It showed that over the course, on average, there was a small reduction in writing communication apprehension. However, that average hides some students that actually increased their apprehension. And so that was partly what made me think that it would be useful to look at what their reflections had to say. And the reflections show that their apprehensions derive from all sorts of different sources, but that the main area is skills, and probably preparedness for writing seems to stick out as an important one. And it is interesting that for this study I only focused on home students, as I didn't want the language to affect what I was looking at. And overseas students actually have quite a lot of preparation for writing before they come to university. And I'd question the preparation that the home students have. Are the courses that they take preparing them to write at university, which is where a lot of them want to go? If they're not, then schools need to look at how they're going to work with universities to make this transition a bit more seamless, so that there is less apprehension on the part of students. Then another area, it's a small area, but I have noticed that some students were talking about the way that the task was presented. So even though most of the time students seem to be fine, some seem to have their nervousness raised by the way that the task was presented by the lecturers. So that might be something to look at in the future as well. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. So these are just the references that I mentioned in the presentation. The full list of references are on the paper itself. And then if you want to carry on the discussion or have any questions, then I can be contacted via my email or via Twitter.